Hi, my name's Nikki and this is pingureads. Today I've got for you guys not a recent book haul, but every book that I've hauled this year, because I think that will give you guys like a good idea of what I actually am interested in and what I like. It's not a great idea of what I actually read this year, but I think it's a good starting point for my first video. And so this year I hauled 22 books so far. It's still only the first or second week of December, so I have a couple of weeks and I may purchase some more books depending on how I feel. So to give you guys a good idea of my book habits, I've split this haul up into 3 sections. I've got books I bought new, which is actually quite small. Then I've got books I found, was gifted, received, that I didn't pay for, I just have them now. And then I have books I bought secondhand, which is the majority of how I get books. Let's start with the books I bought new, because I think that's a good starting point. So first off, we've got Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. This is a speculative fiction short story collection. It's translated from Japanese. And it's set in this small cafe where you buy a coffee and you get to sort of time travel, and it focuses a little bit on regret and on changing the past or looking to the future and things like that. But yeah, you time travel, but you have to be back before the coffee gets cold, hence the title. And it's supposed to be really sad, but also really uplifting. And that's kind of why I bought it, because I heard it was supposed to be sad and it made a lot of people cry. And honestly, if a book makes me laugh out loud, gasp, or cry, that's how I know it's a good one. I'm not huge on like analysing the merits of a book, because I think that that's one way to enjoy reading, but it's not like the end all be all of enjoying reading. If a book makes you feel something, I think that's just as valid as a book that has literary merit. So this is Before the Coffee Gets Cold. I haven't read it yet, but I do have plans to read it in potentially a future video. You'll have to wait and see. The next book I bought new was The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. And I have read a book by Jennifer Lynn Barnes in the past. That's The Normals, I believe. And that one was about kids with superpowers. I'm not so familiar with her writing, but this got really popular on TikTok. I'm not on TikTok, but I've heard that it's supposed to be really good. I got into a habit of reading only romance books this year, even though I'm a big lover of fantasy and mystery and things like that. I did end up just reading, or majority reading, romance books this year, so I'd really like to branch back out into something that isn't just romance. I don't have a great idea what this is about. I think she inherits a sum of money from some billionaire that she doesn't know, the main character, Avery. Yeah, and it's supposed to have like some game and the winner gets all the money, I believe, and there's a bunch of other people. So we'll see if I enjoy it, and I hope I do. And so those are the 2 new books that I bought that I haven't actually read yet. Then I, of course, bought Book Lovers. So I read People We Meet on Vacation this year as an ebook, and I really enjoyed it. It wasn't my favorite thing ever, but I still rated it 5 stars. It did make me cry, so that's part of it. And so I decided, okay, let me go all in. The reason I bought this one and not Beach Read, I watched a video by The Book Leo, so Leonie, here on YouTube. She did a video about reading all 3 of Emily Henry's books, and she described the 3 of them on a scale of like literary and sad to more lighthearted. I tend to be less of an angst girl, so I picked up this one because she described it as being A, her favourite, and B, that it was more lighthearted. I clearly enjoyed it, as you can see. I did rate this 5 stars, I really enjoyed it. It was awesome. I totally just remembered that I didn't say anything about what this is about. So Book Lovers is about a woman. She is a literary agent. She goes on a holiday with her sister to a small town. They stay there for a month, and she finds out that one of her like workplace rivals, which is this grumpy book editor, is also in this town. And so they keep running into each other and they end up having to work on the same book. And they, you know, slowly fall in love. Yay, love that. But in terms of like tropes, because I know the we love a good romance trope, it's very much rivals to lovers or enemies to lovers, however you want to think about it. This book is very self-aware about romance tropes. Our main character, Nora, she describes herself as the icy corporate woman that every man in a small town romance leaves behind. So it's very self-aware about romance tropes, and as someone who consumes a lot of romance books and movies, I really enjoyed it for that reason. It was really good. The criticisms of this book, people say that it focuses a little too much on Nora's relationship with her sister, because that's a main part of the book, as well as her relationship with Charlie. Honestly, I didn't find it to be too much. If anything, it felt more like she was a well-rounded person and not just someone in pursuit of a relationship and nothing else. It's not like she forgot her life when she started feeling something for this man. It was really good. Would recommend. The next book I bought was Delilah Green Doesn't Care. This is a sapphic, I want to say small town romance, but that's not really the vibes of it. So Delilah, this is Delilah, she's a photographer. She comes back because she's been hired to photograph her sister's wedding, right? But there's a lot of like family angst and drama, and so it's a big sort of deal that she's back. And this is her sister's best friend. So this is sister's best friend trope, which I think is great. Yeah, and she's also a single parent, so there's that part of it as well. It felt quite wholesome, it felt quite pleasant to read, I think. And this is like a beautiful one if you just want queer women being happy in your life, then I would recommend it. Also, like, look, really the only reason is because, hello, Miss Delilah, she's beautiful. She's so hot. Of course I was gonna pick it up when you've got a tatted up photographer woman on the cover. And the last book that I bought new was Legendborn. This is a story about Bree Matthews. She's very, very smart. So she is in college or university early through this like undergrad program that she's in. She's still sort of reeling with the grief of her mother's death as well. And she discovers that she might have magic and there's all this secret society stuff. It has sort of dark academia vibes, but this is a young adult fantasy. So it's not as dark as dark academia would hope. It is set in a university, there is a secret society. There's a lot of magic in it, and it's based on like Arthurian legend. But it also goes into our main character Bree's ancestry and her history as a black woman and things like that. And then it explores her mother's death and things like that as well. It was really, really good. I did rate this 5 stars because I really enjoyed it and I really loved it. And the new book in the series, Bloodmarked, I believe, is out now. And when that becomes available on Libby, you bet I am borrowing it and reading it. Let's start with Elantris. I received this one. I got this through a book swap at my university's book club. I did not expect going into a book swap that I would be able to find Mr. Brandon Sanderson. However, am I glad that I did? Yes. So I have read all of Mistborn. That is my favorite fantasy series of all time. And so to find Elantris and the cover that I like as well was great. It was really awesome for me. Elantris is a standalone fantasy. It's set in a world where people used to be turned into demigods by a magic. And so a princess arrives in the city ready to marry into a political marriage and finds her husband to be dead. It kind of goes from there, but it is a standalone. Yeah, so that's Elantris. I'm looking forward to reading it. I think I might read this one, or if I can get my hands on Warbreaker, then I will read Warbreaker next, because I just finished The Lost Metal, which is book 7 in the Mistborn trilogy. If you do want like a good explanation of the Cosmere, I will try to link some videos below that I think explain it really well. We have Oathbreaker Part 1 by Brandon Sanderson. One of my friends gave it to me because they had it, but they weren't really interested in reading it after they realized, hey, this is book 3 in the Stormlight Archives. This is part 1 of book 3 in the Stormlight Archives. So I haven't started reading the Stormlight Archives, but I have The Way of Kings, but I don't have book 2, but I'm always down to get more Brandon Sanderson books, especially if they're in the right cover and the right size. I'm very happy to receive them. So yeah, I haven't read it and I probably won't read it for a while, but I think it's always good to have it. On a different note, we have The Bloody Chamber and Other Stories by Angela Carter. And now I am about 56 pages into this book. This is a short story collection. It was written in the 50s. It's a like horror thriller reimagining of fairy tales. All of them have like this feminist for the time, because it was written in the 50s, twist to them. I'm enjoying it. But yeah, this was one of the things I got at that same book swap, because, I don't know, I had heard about it, I believe, on Books and Lala's channel, but I might be wrong. I think she'd mentioned it, and so when I saw it at the table, I thought, oh yeah, I've heard of this, and this seems interesting. And so I got it. Some of the lines are so vivid and grotesque. Like, you can feel the tension in the writing, and you can feel the themes of womanhood and of purity and oppression when you read it, just because of the way that it's written, even without the content of the stories. And so I think that's really cool. But yeah, I am slowly making my way through it, even though it's like 150 pages long, but I give myself leeway with a short story collection. Next we have Animal Farm. Yeah, so one of my friends was getting rid of this, and so I picked it up. I've read Animal Farm once. I read it when I was in high school. I really liked it, which was like quite odd when you read something in high school for English class. I think everyone knows what Animal Farm's about. It's sort of a dystopian micro society of pigs on a farm, and it's sort of an allegory for the Soviet Union and the Cold War and things like that. And now we move on to books I found in free little libraries, or I believe they're called street libraries here. So I found The Unhoneymooners, and I had read this already when I found it. And so when I found this, I was like, okay, well, I've already read it and I did enjoy it. And I do want to have romance books on my shelves, because I think my shelves are not so representative of what I read anymore. I started picking up romance books. I really got sucked into them. Now my bookshelves don't have heaps of romance books on them because I kept borrowing them from the library and getting ebook copies and things like that. And so I think like having some of the books that I have read, especially when you find them in a free little library, I think it's awesome. The Unhoneymooners is about a woman, her sister gets married, and she's the maid of honor, and she really dislikes best man. And so neither of them eat at the wedding, but everyone else at the wedding gets food poisoning. The bride and groom gift their honeymoon to the maid of honor and the best man, because they're like, hey, we have this non-refundable holiday, we all have food poisoning, you guys should go on the holiday. So these two people who hate each other, who aren't romantically involved, have to pretend to be married to sort of, you know, just have a holiday. But slowly, you know, there's only one bed, they have all these experiences that lead them to like falling in love and stuff. It's good. I wouldn't say it's the best book ever. In terms of like new romance tropes, this doesn't feel new, but I think it has one of those premises that feels a little bit done, but it's a good solid romance read if you're looking for sort of a holiday, summery vibe. And the last two that I found in the little free library, we have The Giver by Lois Lowry. It's one of those books that has intrigued me because it is such a classic, but it is a modern classic, so I think it was written in like the 90s or something. So yeah, I'm looking forward to reading it. It's one of those books that is never going to be an urgent read for me. It's never going to be like on my want to read TBR. But with all classics, one day I'll be like, you know what? Today I read The Giver. And so that's what that's for. And now next we have 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And I haven't read this, and honestly I know very little about what it is, but it's a classic, and it's one of those things that I think one day, if I get a really good recommendation for it, I will read it. But that day is not today, nor will it be soon. If you guys have read any of these books that I am mentioning, please let me know if you enjoyed them or you disliked them, because I would really love a push to either read it or unhaul it. So those are the books that I bought new and that I just sort of got somehow. Now let's move on to books that I bought secondhand. We have, of course, another Brandon Sanderson. This is book 4 of the Mistborn series, book 1 of arc 2. This starts the sort of like pseudo-western arc of Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn series. And this one follows Waxilium Ladrian. He is he's like a bounty hunter, but he's also like the son of a very noble house, but he left at a young age. And so now he's being tasked with coming back into the city and taking over his role as a lord. But of course he's still like a bounty hunter cop guy. He's going to solve crime in the big city, maybe. But there's also, within this world, the magic system is based on metals. So you swallow metals and then you can like burn them, and each different metals have different magic abilities that they sort of grant. And yeah, that's sort of the context and like what's happening in this book. And so we've got The Lies of Loch Lamora, which I picked up at a big like sort of secondhand book fair. We have them fairly often. They happen every couple of months here in Sydney. So I tend to go to those and like scrounge around and find the really good books that I want to read. And so obviously The Lies of Loch Lamora is a quite well-known fantasy book. This is like low magic fantasy is the way that I would describe it. There's this group of thieves. They just generally steal from people, and it's like supposed to be really good and really well written. But because it is low magic adult fantasy, it's one of those things that I'm a little bit hesitant to pick up. But yeah, it's sort of set in this like underworld of this city, and they've got like turf wars and like murder and things happening. The actual plot of this book, I don't actually know what it's about. I'm keen to pick it up. I've heard it's a little bit more difficult, and that really does, as much as it shouldn't like be something that puts me off. I have read so many like easy to read romance books recently that I'm kind of scared to pick up like any book that is supposed to be a little bit difficult to read. The next couple I've got are some classics. So I've got Agatha Christie's Murder on the Orient Express. This is obviously like a whodunit mystery. It's sort of like locked room is the way I would describe it, but obviously it's set on a train. This follows Hercule Poirot, which is one of Agatha Christie's like main detective dudes. It's a classic and it's been adapted many times, and honestly I find these kinds of whodunit mysteries very comforting to read. And then we've got The Handmaid's Tale, which I haven't read either, and this is a dystopian. I believe most people would know about The Handmaid's Tale. It's sort of like a repressive, misogynistic, patriarchal state. Women and their bodies are highly like regulated and highly oppressed in this society. It's very dystopian. It's by Margaret Atwood. It's one of those classic dystopian novels that fall among the ranks of 1984 and Brave New World as well. And it's supposed to be really good, and when I feel like reading about this kind of terror, I will pick it up. The next thing I bought was Illuminae. I've been seeing this on BookTube for years and years and years, and I know that this is supposed to be really good. It's sort of like multimedia. It's YA sci-fi, I believe. It's set in this ship, and there's like corporations and they're at war. These two kids, maybe teenagers, I don't know, but they are on opposite sides of the ship and they can't see each other, they can't find each other, but they like communicate through the ship's like logs, and the story is told through like CCTV and like memos and letters and things like that. So it should be really interesting. Even though it's like this thick, it's gonna read a lot shorter than that just because some of the pages are like, you know, like barely text. But it's supposed to be really good, and people have been raving about this on BookTube for years and years and years. Then of course we have All Fall Down by Ali Carter. Ali Carter is an amazing author. She's so good at writing a tension-filled, like, heist story, a spy story, that is YA, and it just feels like a good time. I've read so many of her books. I've read her entire Gallagher Girls series, which is like a girls' boarding school for spies and it's like amazing. It's really, really good. And I've read her Heist Society series, which is about art thieves, and it's great. This is the first one in the Embassy Row series, where it's the kids of like ambassadors and people who live on Embassy Row. And so there's all this like tension and political drama, but obviously they're still kids, right? But yeah, it's like a light-hearted. The stakes feel much lower than like adult thrillers, I guess. And I would put these more in like sort of, these are thrillers rather than mystery or horror books. These are truly just thrillers because they're action-packed. This one follows the granddaughter of the US ambassador. Her mother has been murdered and she witnessed the murder, but nobody believes that her mother was murdered. And so she is looking to solve that crime. And it's all very, very dangerous because it follows like major political players as well as their children. These are just really fun to read. And so these last four, I'm going to talk about them in one big grouping because I went to my local thrift store twice in 1 week. And I honestly think there's someone in my area who's like really, really into like BookTube and like dark academia and who like read all these books and then donated them in one go. This is my big conspiracy theory. I think there's one person in my area who has my book taste when it comes to like dark academia and fantasy. And then they like donated all their books and I want to find them and I want them to give me their book collection. The first time I went, I found Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, both of them. I've obviously read both of these and I loved them and they're amazing, but I never bought copies because I'm not a person who buys new books, generally. So I found both of these and like, I was in shock and awe. But yeah, Six of Crows. It's so popular. If you haven't heard about Six of Crows by now, read it. Like, read it. Read both of them. They're so good. And even if you're like, no, but I'm not into YA fantasy, read it. Read it. It's actually so good. It's amazing. That was the first time I went that week. I found Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom. The second time I went that week, I found Babel at the thrift store. This book came out this year. And I found Ninth House. So this person is clearly like very much into dark academia and very much into like, I'm sorry, I know I'm going on about this conspiracy theory that there's this person in my area, but I love them and I never want them to leave. So Babel is it's a dark academia. It follows this diverse group of university students that are studying translation at Oxford. There's this like magic system involved as well, and this like silver working magic system within this book. It's sort of alternate historical fiction fantasy vibes. It's set in the 1800s, and so you follow this diverse group of people. It's a response to the secret history. Well, dark academia in literature has been criticized fairly heavily for being very white and very like elite. And so how most dark academia books tend to criticize classism or elitism or something similar, this one goes into colonialism fairly heavily, which I think is really, really interesting. And then we have Ninth House, which is set at Yale. We follow Alex Stern, who is a new student at Yale, and they end up sort of involved in all these secret societies at Yale, and they all perform a different kind of magic. And then there is the Ninth House, which regulates the rest. And that's sort of the premise of Ninth House. This is by Leigh Bardugo, who wrote Six of Crows, and I'm looking forward to reading it. I haven't read it yet. This came out a couple of years ago, and the sequel is coming out next year, so I would like to read it before the sequel comes out. I will say, as these are both like dark academia books, if you're looking to like know a little bit more about dark academia in general, I would really recommend Leonie's video about it. If you're interested in knowing about dark academia and not shy about watching a long video. However, those were the 22 books that I hauled this year. I'm Nikki, this is Pingu Reads, and thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.